All hands on deck, Starfighters. This is Richard Terrell, otherwise known as Kirby Kid, and you are watching Hunternet Starfighter Missile Circus, a design lesson in subtraction. It's a panel at EGX Digital 2020, brought to you by Design Oriented. This panel is actually the story of Fernando Zapata. He's the sole creator of Hunternet Starfighter, and as an indie developer, he has experienced a lot of the ups and downs of designing video games. So I've got Fernando on the call right here, so I'm going to switch over and we'll say hi.
Hi, Richard.
Hey, Fernando. The whole point of this talk is that we will cover what it means to both of us to design by subtraction. Designing by subtraction is a general method in which designers sort of remove elements in their game that aren't necessary to really hone in and focus in on the core gameplay, the core meaning, the core action, something like that, right? A lot of art and a lot of design really can do this, right? Eliminating extraneous elements, making sure that their product is as lean, as mean, as efficient, whatever, cost effective as possible. Whenever you're considering design, which is really the approach, the method, the study, the craft, the art of reaching goals by making decisions about your product, decisions about the experience, and hopefully when you target your goals specifically, you can actually achieve them better. That's really what design's all about. And when your design goal is, I don't want this thing to be a bloated mess, then you've got yourself a very clear design goal. So to achieve this effect, some designers go in with their game and they start with a big complex game, and then they start cutting away features. Ueda made Shadow of the Colossus. His games are known for that kind of minimalist, really atmospheric, really moody, really interesting kind of approach to crafting powerful experiences. So that's kind of like the name of the game here, design by subtraction. But in your case, we got a completely different story. And from my perspective, all things considered, I think it's kind of a waste in order to make this huge game, right? Put all this stuff into it, spend years and years making it, and then, very intentionally going, I'm going to start cutting away 50, 80% of it just, to make the game I actually wanted to make, right? And, hindsight's
Right.
2020. If we all had the power to make exactly what we wanted out the gate, we wouldn't really be having this conversation. But the one thing I want to point out is that this happens a lot, and it's really painful, right? A lot of creators, a lot of indies experience this very thing where they reach some point in their project and they've got a ton of stuff in it, and they don't know exactly which stuff to keep, what to cut, and that's kind of an interesting point to focus on in terms of understanding what you're making in the first place and how you got to that point. I think that's exactly where you found yourself. I guess, how many years ago would you say?
About a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago,
Mhm.
that's when I really whittled it down to where it is now.
Let's talk a brief history about Hunternet. Like, when did it start?
The first phase is the prototype, what I call the prototype phase. That's where all the characters were monkeys. Then the next phase was what I call the Kirby phase, where I was using this character. I started buying some third party artwork. Try to go for somewhat of a Nintendo aesthetic. Then there's the first spaceship phase, which is what I call Space Combat Unbound, where I tried to carry on more of the design from the Kirby phase into the spaceship phase. And then there's the phase right now, hopefully the final phase, has to be the final phase, Starfighter, where I really narrowed it down and refocused on Starfighters. So it's 4 phases. The first phase is started in 2012. The next phase was 2014. The next phase was 2016. So there's like 2 years apart. And then this phase was last year.
Yeah, so I wonder if you can show us some of these earlier builds. Show us exactly what you mean by flying monkeys or or boxy Unity levels. I want to see this
So
footage.
this prototype is from December 9th. So what you're seeing here, this is the first prototype that I saved, very, very early on. Maybe I had worked on it for a month or so. And you're looking through Suzanne, the Blender mascot's eyes. And it's actually a multiplayer prototype. And you can see the world is, just made out of cubes around the time where Minecraft was really popular. Even this early version, all you could do was shoot. One thing I played with in this version was very dark shadows, so you could hide. I got sniped many times from these corners up here. Wait for people. But yeah, the bullets, as you can tell, are very slow, because I always like slow. That's something that hasn't really changed. I like projectiles that I can see and move out the way, feel like I was a kid in the playground.
Mhm.
You can already see a little bit of my like try everything approach, because in this version you can do charge jumps like Super Mario Brothers 2.
Oh wow.
You know, the longer you jump it, so you can fly, and you can also do wall jumps. If you press it against the wall, I just jumped off that wall, and it had no theme, so it kind of encouraged me to just try different stuff. Yeah, but this is the early version. It was mainly to test, that the networking worked, and that I had the capabilities to make a smooth multiplayer shooting game. But I also had this notion that the only way I could be successful is if I made a shooter that was really different.
I mean, everybody knows a lot of game projects, a lot of projects in general can look very different from the start, from the finish. It's really cool to see some of the through lines where you start to feel like you get a sense of your developer fingerprint, as I call it, like all the things you almost always put in every single one of your games, like slow bullets for you, flying, things like that. When you're brainstorming, right? When you're in charge, when you're an indie and you're calling all the shots, man, it's so exciting to be at a point where anything you can think of, you can try to make, and then it's all of a sudden in a video game, right? I know that feeling. You know that feeling. Just about everyone, I think, who's an indie probably has gone through an experience just like that, where they made a game that had every single thing they could think of, and I think it's just a stepping stone, a measuring stick for indie game development, the maturity of an indie developer.
So this image is the old keyboard guide. It's not necessarily the most complex, but it's one of the more complex ones. You can see, there's more than 20 keys devoted to to the game.
I just like the fact that some of your attacks are shrimp, frog, and drone, which looks like a bumblebee, and then repel and absorb. It was so nuts playing this game. You would
Yeah,
tell me there's a frog missile. I'm like, what is going on?
drone, frog, teleport,
Oh wow.
absorb. Even has the old monkey area. You see here? So I mean, sometimes I think of them as just completely separate games, but I build each one on the bones of the previous one. So, and even this version, I started experimenting with some sci-fi areas. You see that map in the background?
Yeah.
That's the first level of Doom.
Up there because you.
Yeah, this is Doom right here. This is the Doom level.
You just teleported up there into the sky.
Yeah, through the portal.
Why
Portal,
not?
man. I always liked outer space. This is the asteroid map. This is a humongous asteroid that you can get inside.
Ooh.
See how cool?
Well, that looks cool.
I was learning how to be a game programmer, right? Learning about game design. So it was like a kid in a candy store to a certain extent, trying different things. Doing all this, I was, learning Unity, learning game design, learning game programming, and reading books about marketing.
Wait, go close to your character. I want to see the Kirby-ness. All right, here's the flying Kirby. Hideous.
I like games that have lots of variety, but those games, they had more logic to the variety. Like Smash Brothers has lots of variety because there's lots of different games. And I watch a lot of anime too, where you have shows with lots of different abilities, like Hunter x Hunter, right?
Yeah.
That's where the Bungie comes from. Well, in Hunter x Hunter, each character you meet has completely different abilities.
What about the name of the game? Does that have anything to do with Hunter x Hunter?
A little bit, yeah. Hunternet from networking, and the Hunter from Hunter x Hunter, and also because one key theme I always liked playing chasing games and shooting games because of that feeling of you're being hunted or you're the hunter. So that was always part of it.
Tell us how you were feeling when you were about at this stage and the next stage as you pull up that next build.
I mean, if I had unlimited time and unlimited energy and health, then it wouldn't bother me as much. Because I enjoyed the process, I enjoyed it. Was fun. It's not like I never enjoyed what I was doing, but you only have so much time. You only have so many projects you're going to work on. If you can get to where you want to be more quickly while still having fun, then why not? Get the best of both worlds.
I never want to disparage people from having these kinds of experiences, right? Indies don't have a ton of great options when it comes to having really effective ways to learn about game design. Game development itself is a highly complex, multifaceted hobby, industry, pursuit, discipline, craft, all of it. So whenever people just jump in and things get a little messy, I don't blame them. I know I've been there, I am there. Like, I get it.
Because as you get older, you realize that time is not unlimited. By the time I got to the Kirby phase, that was when I wanted to share the game with the world. for the first time. And I said, okay, it can't be monkey heads. It needs to be some real art. So I bought some art from the Unity Asset Store. The game was kind of, even though it was hard, I've always been a big fan of Nintendo games, so I liked the whimsical art, magic, fantasy, anything can happen. You know, in Mario Brothers games, you have mushrooms and stars, all sorts of weird stuff. So I was going for that sort of Nintendo vibe. But when I made that available, the reaction wasn't that great, and the messaging was confusing. So I think that eventually led to the next phase, the phase I'm going to show you right now, Space Combat Unbound, something I felt that maybe I could actually pull off as a business. So I switched to Hunternet One Unusual Shooter, which is what I subtitled the previous game, to Hunternet Space Combat Unbound. A little reference to Halo there, right? But I carried over a lot of that craziness from One Unusual Shooter, where I was purposely trying to be unusual, purposely trying to be different, right? And I just twisted it as I could into this space shooter that was unbound by regular conventions. Okay, so this is the third phase of the project. This is the Space Combat Unbound. So by the time I got to here, I switched the themes completely. Now, how was I feeling? When I first started, I just felt a very excitement. I had just discovered Unity. I had seen that there was indie games that were, able to be financially successful. People could do it as a living. And I thought, you know what? At that point, I had already been working as a professional developer for over a decade. I wanted to try what I really loved, which was games, something I had always, messed with in the past and wanted to do, but I'd never felt like I wanted to work for a big company.
Before you were working in software, not games. So yeah, you're making
not
the switch
games.
Into games. Okay.
Yep. So I had a lot of experiences as a professional software developer and only hobbyist experience as a game developer. So yeah, it just gave me this confidence, and I had so much fun with it. And I told my wife, and I was so productive with this. If I could work on it full time, who knows what I could do? Let's give it a shot. We didn't have kids. We didn't have any big financial responsibilities, and she was supportive. And I quit my job and started working on the game.
This is roughly about this time when you started interacting with us at Design Oriented.
Yes.
When I first met you, you had popped into our Discord and you had said hi, and you're like, I got a game I'm working on, and we eventually got our hands on it. So this is kind of where I think the most interesting turning point in the sort of mentality and understanding of this game's design is about to happen.
So here I am. When you start out, you actually have a little help screen. Teaching you some of the basics. It had a third-person view. It also has a cockpit view, which the current cockpit is an evolution of this one. There's a radar, something the old version of the game didn't have. This is also the phase when I moved to itch.io and was showing the game to a lot of random people who would stumble upon it on itch.io. Yeah, the hangar is where you can come and you can see all the abilities. And there are a lot of the old abilities from before.
Hey,
there's
the frog.
You had the bungee. Repel became a reflector shield, right? The drone that used to be a mini version of yourself got changed to an actual, sci-fi drone. Alliance, which let you summon allies and also let you change teams. So you can tell each ability is relatively complex. Traps, decoys, and teleport, absorption shield, tracers, smash. And this is the old ricochet gun, which is basically evolution of the very first weapon you saw in the original monkey prototype.
The monkey shot.
And this Micronomicon, you can make yourself into a mini version. And it's inspired by one of my favorite shooters. I was taking definitely inspiration, like you said earlier, from all the games that I love. And I think that's just a common thing. You're thinking like a kid, and I think a lot of game designers are still kids at heart. That's like, put all my toys in here. So I like the face hugger in Alien vs. Predator, so this is my version of the face hugger. Instead of having tons of maps like I had in that old version where you went through portals, I narrowed it down to just one map. And it's a map with lots of,
put tons of stuff in it.
I was more focused about having lots of cool obstacles, places to run through. My wife actually made part of it.
Yeah,
I added to it.
As dense as this level is, I really liked it. Just lots of nooks and crannies and turns and twists and ups and downs, and surprisingly it has a lot of asymmetry that you could keep track of where you are. Like this is a green area, it's a blue cube, and all these different little visual markers. I like this level.
One thing I'll say, like the game has been very complicated, hard to get into, it has all these design issues, but it was fun and has been fun from almost always the beginning. And we played this map over and over again. And yeah, the different areas have a lot of variety. There's asymmetry. It's a good map for even impromptu racing.
When you were about the time, this is like the third major phase in the development of Hunternet. Um, you were disappointed a little bit in how your last phase went, was marketed, how it came across, how complicated it was. You made some changes to this version and you tried some stuff. By the time you got to design oriented, were you looking for feedback? Were you thinking like my game's pretty close? Like, tell me what you were thinking.
I'm the kind of guy that likes to read and research as much as possible.
Mhm.
So I read a lot of the game design books that were popular at the time. I went to Barnes and Nobles and read all the game design books they had there, every single one. I went and got some other ones online. All the ones that are well known, like the Jesse Snell books of lenses, the Raph Koster Theory of Fun, Crawford. I read Crawford's book, and read a lot of stuff online. And I had run into had read your blog, and it was one of the best blogs out there. I found you guys had a Discord, and I had Discord, and I said, hey, well, this is great. I can actually meet these people, talk to them. So I joined to wanting to talk to you and just meet people. In terms of how I felt about the game, I have ups and downs. And I had them then. I still have them till today, where you're like, the game is fun. I had a friend who's been playtesting the game from the very beginning. Shout out to Gerald Keeves, one of my best friends. And he played the original Monkey prototype, all the versions until now. And we always had fun together. And many times he told me, oh, it's good enough now, just release it. Just put it out there. And I never felt confident. Like, I knew the game was fun, but I never felt confident that it could work as as a game that was financially successful, right? For all the different reasons. And even at this day, I still felt that way. I didn't feel like I wanted to start completely over in a completely different direction, like I had done originally when I switched to working on Hunternet from a different genre. So I wanted to say, okay, I'm going to release some shooter. I need to figure out what that shooter is going to be, and it needs to be something that's successful. I'll try one time. If it doesn't succeed, I'm going to give up and go back to my regular life and just do game design as a hobby. So I've always had that sort of running my background. So that's the kind of way I was thinking when I joined the community.
So yeah, after that first day we had talked. It was we still got clips from some of our first messages, some of the first streams that I did talking about your game live and playing it. We do a lot of stuff at Design Oriented where we give people live feedback. We talk live. We go face cam as much as we can, and we do streams and we talk about things actively because that's what we found to make really strong bonds and really effective community. What I really liked about Fernando's game, even at this point, this is when I jumped in, was like, oh, it's a lot of fun. And I think one of the first pieces of feedback I gave you in my write-up, it's just like, you've achieved something that so many game developers could not and will not ever achieve. Like, your game is fun, it's smooth, right? Net coding is incredible. Everything is just nice. And it just makes it to where you step into this world, you've got something to do, places to explore, and all these skills to practice. And I really like that about your game. Everything beyond that, I was like, the experience is very complex. It's confusing, and I'm not sure what all these pieces do, and it seems really, really difficult to explain. Because every time we would jump into a chat and you would show me a new feature, it'd be all this explanation, and then I'd be like, okay, what button do I hit? Wait, the frog does what? Wait, when I drone, attach, teleport, hack, with what now? Like, this is so much. So that was like some of the basic feedback that I gave, and what I really liked is that your story is so interesting. Like so many of us, driven by passion, but you in particular had a really good work ethic. You researched, you asked questions when you needed to, you got feedback, you had a little community. All those were the great steps, and I felt like the only thing you needed to do was just tighten up the design, and you had like a real winner. What I loved about your story was the dedication and what I would call the minimalist approach to, pursuing your dreams. Like, you weren't under any illusion that this was going to be easy. You moved to Taiwan because of the lower cost of living. You got rid of like all your clothes and stuff, like to try to get as efficient as possible. You only worked on a laptop at the beginning, right?
Yeah,
And
the
yeah,
whole development. Yeah, I started on a Mac Mini and then later Mac laptops.
a
Yeah,
Mac Mini. Yeah, and then you picked Unity, right? Good start,
yeah.
cheap, free, and you built your community one small piece at a time. And I felt like you did all the right steps to really making sure that you focused on what you need to do to get the job done. And I really felt like the only thing you didn't do, like out of all that minimalism and out of all that subtracting things out of your life, your game was packed with all these ideas, like packed. And so I was like, that's so interesting how after all that, the one last thing, which is interesting, like the last thing is probably the thing you held most close to your original inspiration, to your passion, right? Like you love all these toys and ideas. So yeah, like you said before, the unique aspects of your game are difficult to explain. They're difficult to teach. There's a lot of button mapping. But then, when it all comes together, it was cool. But obviously, there's give and take. There's pros and cons to every single decision like that. You mentioned before about a kick to the side of the head, creativity wise.
So one of the books that I read a lot of books during this time. So I was reading books on writing, books on creativity, architecture, art, history, everything. But always when I read them, I was always thinking, okay, how can I apply this to the game? How can I learn from this? And one of the books that I read was A Kick to the Side of the Head. It's a book on creativity. It's just a book celebrating the value of creativity. The book is not a bad book or anything, but I think it helped to reinforce some of the bad habits that I had of just trying everything because I have limited time, limited energy. If I just try everything, it has its downside and nothing is free. But it sort of, helped encourage me to keep going down the route that I was on instead of narrowing things down and focusing and figuring out what was really going to work.
Very good. So I think you realized the final realization you had after our talks and after feedback, questions, answers, tweaks, feedback. This didn't happen overnight, right? We were just talking and playing and mostly enjoying the game and just digging as deeply as we could. And after all that, well, I think one of the realizations you came down to was that games are more than just functional systems, right? Like it's got to be more than my code works.
I think one thing I realized uh, when I was in design oriented community was to appreciate other parts of the game more and to think about them more. I always thought this from the point of view, I think, being a programmer, a lifelong programmer from a very early age, you start thinking like a programmer. So you end up being very focused on the mechanical systems, the design, the code, the technology, not so much on the rest of the game, the theme. It's not really the story, but just the coherentness of the universe, of the experience. And I think one of the things I realized when I was a design oriented, I needed to give it a more holistic look. Whereas before it was very much more, here's a bunch of toys, here's all the things I enjoy. It wasn't focused in any way. I'd figure out ways of sort of convincing myself that it wasn't a problem. So for example, even in this build, this kind of led to Hunternet Starfighter. There's a frame, a spaceship frame that you can switch to that could only use 3 abilities. So I figured, well, if I make that the default, people can use that, and who cares if the rest of the game is that complicated? This thing is really simple. It's like logical in some ways, okay? But it showed a lack of maturity in terms of as a game designer.
Yeah, so I love it. After all those toys, after all that cool experimentation, I think you just realized you wanted to fly around and shoot things, right? Way back, you realize after all the things that have changed, what didn't change from all your prototypes, flying around and shooting stuff. And I think that like perfectly describes the elegance and the focus that's currently in your latest build, Hunternet Starfighter. So you basically cut roughly 85% of those toys, like not the code, not the foundational net coding or anything, but the features,
Out
right?
of all those abilities, only 1, 2.
Two out of four, two on the one hand that made it in, 14 that were cut.
Yeah.
And the game is just so clear. I think one of the best parts about the game, so much so it really speaks for itself. So the fourth and final phase is a incredibly lean, deep, and technically robust flight combat space simulator, right? You get to fly around, you get to shoot, you get to team up with your allies. The net coding is solid, and everything about the game, the stuff that I liked most, I mean, I liked a lot of the cool stuff. Who doesn't like cool stuff? But the part that I really liked the most, the part that was most apparent when you first started playing the previous versions, and that the game is now focused on, is just flying and shooting, and the game does that incredibly well, better than any other game that I've seen and played. You made the right cuts and the right decisions to keep the core, the excitement, the quality design, and everything as the front and center of the experience, and everything else is just gameplay from there. People can spend hours and hours and hours and hours refining this teamwork, all kinds of modes and scenarios, gameplay. There's so many ideas that you've told me, I can't share with the stream, but there's so many ideas that you have for this game, and right now your core is the strongest foundation you have to making the rest of that come to life. So out of all the things you cut, it's amazing that now the game says like one thing and one thing clearly, and the game just speaks for itself, right? There's really,
Yeah.
I think I explained that there's three main classes now, three weapon slots, and instead of like a really dense space station, it's wide open, nearly empty space, and yet that made the game so much more clear in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think being clear really is the key thing. Before, like you said, there was cool stuff in there. You can appreciate it. I can appreciate it. We like a lot of the same games. Before it was like Fernando's collection of favorite things. Now it's be a Star Wars, Starfighter pilot. Be Starbuck in Battlestar Galactica. Lots of people have that dream. People can this shared image. People see it. It's like, okay, I get to be a fighter pilot in a starship. It's easy to understand. It's easy to convey. And it's easy to get people excited about it. And then you play it, and that's what it is. It's different than other games. It has its own unique aspects, but it makes sense to you. So it shows really well in the video. People can get excited about it. It's something that other people already wanted to exist. It's more than just about me.
Yeah.
I think I've included the audience in a way that the old design didn't include the audience.
Mm-hmm.
The old design was like, here's my pair of toys, come play with them if you want to.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So that clarity, it helps so much. It doesn't just help from the game design side, design oriented, we mainly were talking about game design, but it helps so much on the business side and on just getting people to be excited about your game, which is, I think, very important to keep you working on it. I had a lot of passion that somehow I made it this far and then give up. But it's so much more enjoyable now knowing that I can tell people, hey, I have this game about being a starfighter pilot, and they get excited about that. And then I show them a video and they get excited about it. They start playing the game, and I don't need to work on a tutorial because they know what a starfighter pilot does. They know the general idea.
Yeah.
They look at the equipment. There's more weapons now, but they're all weapons that are classic. You've seen them in the movies. You've seen them in other games.
Yeah.
So it all just fits together. And there's no shortage of things that I still want to do with the game. So it's not like because it has a stronger core doesn't mean the game is smaller. It'll be bigger than the old versions ever were.
Yep.
Okay. Well, what I want to say is anybody who wants to play the game, all they got to do is go to cpudreams.com, and there you'll find a link to the Discord, which is discord.gg/Hunternet. And just join, and you can just send me a message and I'll bring you into the closed alpha, or by the time you see this, we're in a more open phase, and you can join that way as well. I always love new players that are new to the genre and players that are old. I've found players of all types have enjoyed it. Even if you don't play space games, it's got tons of depth, but it's quite easy to get into.
Yeah, like Fernando was saying, this whole thing came about out of a genuine appreciation of creative work, the hard work he put into it, and he respected my work on my blog and writing, and it was just a community and a friendship right there, right? I play this game because it's neat. I don't give him advice because I feel like I owe it to him. I don't do it because I feel like it's a job or anything. This game is neat. In games, I love games. I find them neat, and this is my favorite way to engage with them and talk to the developers and really just hope that the best comes out of all of it. So at the core of all that, that's the spirit of design oriented. We do consulting services like this. You can find out more on our website, but essentially this is what you're going to get, long term, as deeply as we can, candid look at design, and we just run the race from there. It's all about growing as designers, both of us, all of us. So thank you, Fernando, Zapata. That was an incredible game. I can't wait to play more, and I hope everyone out there plays as well.
Thank you, Richard.